I'd like to welcome everyone today for the next episode of the conversation series. We have with us Professor Balaman Ravindran from IIT Madras. He has been working for over 3 decades, is it?
3 decades now, yeah.
On various aspects of AI, which we will go into. He heads and is the founder of 3 centers on AI in IIT Madras. The most interesting for me is the Center for Responsible AI.
Me too.
And so welcome to the program. I'd like to start with a brief history of how you came into AI, because AI now is a fad. I mean, it's a big thing. I wouldn't call it a fad, but when you started, it probably was
A big thing.
a big thing in a different way. I mean, it was probably more of looked at it from the point of view of mathematics rather than from the point its application was not so big.
So the thing with AI, right, is that it has been going through multiple cycles, right? So this whole notion of creating intelligence, right, which humans have been trying to do, right, since time immemorial, right? So in fact, this notion of learning and thinking and how do you get an artificial or a non-human entity to think, even Greek philosophers have written about it. So it's not something that's fascinated humans now, right? It is. So whenever there is even the remote chance of AI coming into the public domain, right? So there's been a lot of interest in AI. So in fact, so there is a story that in 1985 or 87, when one of the top AI conferences was held in LA, so the mayor of LA came to the inauguration of the conference and said that this is the largest event to happen in LA after the Olympics. So AI has gone through these significant, bubble and burst cycles already. So when I started back, when I was in school, right? So my father bought me a book on artificial intelligence from the Singapore airport. This was in 85 or 86 or something like that.
So this was before you started your university?
Before I started my college, I was still in school.
Wow.
Right? So he bought this book. I mean, he just knew I'd like to read stuff. So he bought me this book on artificial intelligence. And this was a book that was being sold in airport bookstores. Okay? So you can imagine the kind of popularity AI must have. It turned out that actually it was a textbook. He didn't know that. He just thought it was some light reading book that he bought me. So I ended up started reading from there, and then I said, okay, this is fascinating. So when I went to college, I wanted to know more about AI. Unfortunately, during my undergrad days, AI was not that popular in college curriculum. So I still managed to do some additional reading and stuff like that. So I started from then, right? At that point of time, the most popular AI paradigm were neural networks. Just like now, back then also, neural networks were very popular. So I started learning about neural networks. But unfortunately, what had happened in the early 90s, right? late 80s, early 90s, neural networks have kind of started slowly moving away from their, explaining biological intelligence origins into becoming more efficient tools for doing optimization and things like that. And for me, I wanted to know more about how, biological or natural intelligence arose, right? And looked at AI as a means of mathematically modeling that and explaining that and so on and so forth. So I started thinking about looking at other areas which I could work in and learn about during my master's, which happened here, IISc in Bangalore. So at that point, I came upon reinforcement learning. That was not a very popular topic back then, right? So there were very few people working in reinforcement learning. In fact, there was not even a textbook on reinforcement learning, so we had to go read papers and things like that. So I started from then. So, but by the time I finished my master's, I started my PhD, that AI bubble had started bursting, right? So when I was doing my PhD, there were not too many people working on AI, and you can go to jobs in artificial intelligence, or if you have a PhD in reinforcement learning, you're more or less stuck looking for a job in academia and things like that, rather than looking at industry jobs and things. So the bubble had burst by then. And then when I started my career as an academic, right, people were more into computer networks and cryptography and a bunch of other things, and not necessarily looking at AI until this current wave restarted. So things have been going in cycles. So I got into AI in the previous summer of AI. Now we are here for a prolonged summer.
Yeah, because I remember at the time when I was actually doing my master's, I think it was still in one of those bust phases, I think, where the funding had essentially
Funding was exactly, that's where the
and I think the concentration was more on the theoretical aspects of how do you act. Yeah,
things you could do with less money.
things you could, that explains. And so that brings me to my next question, which is, at that point, there was a very strong emphasis on how do you prove that say an algorithm is doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And at least there were formal proofs that were being worked on, and at some point it just became too difficult to work on. And from there we have moved to a place where it's kind of the Wild West now, where in a sense you don't even know what the algorithms are doing. Or the algorithms have started out, but in a sense, because they are evolving, we don't know how things are actually being done.
They have, I think with neural networks itself, right? In the, even the early generation of neural networks, when they started becoming very popular and very successful, when even non-neural AI, right? For example, many of us will remember Vishwanathan Anand playing Deep Thought, and then in Blue coming and beating Gary Kasparov or things like that. So they were non-neural network-based AI systems, but they were actually being used in. There were solutions that people were actually building on top of these kinds of search algorithms and knowledge-based algorithms, things like that. So even then, right, the most popular classification algorithm used in the industry are decision trees. We still don't have strong theoretical results about decision trees, and they have been around from the 90s. So it's always been, this fine line between things that worked and things that we know how they worked, right? So it's not something that it's not suddenly become the Wild West. But I agree, the emphasis on trying to understand the theoretical aspects have gone down significantly now, right? Partly because we are dealing with problem spaces that are so large, and we are not sure what are the right mathematical tools to handle it. I believe the physicists who study complex systems and complex dynamics are the ones who are the closest to having a handle on how these things evolve. And some very interesting results have come from some of the strong theoretical physics groups around the world. But that's not, see, the thing is, right now, you are able to derive very good value out of the models that are working. Right? So people are not stopped explain them. So the theoretical results that are coming from these physics groups, right, are not getting absorbed into the mainstream ML community as much as they should be.
So are you suggesting that the results that the theoretical physicists have come up with are also trying to explain better in terms of how it works, or does it provide a framework for actually trying to put a net around what it can do and how?
They're right now more in the space of trying to explain how it works, right? When they come to a point where they can say, okay, hey, I know how to make it work better, I think they'll have a larger impact. And trying to put a net around it, we don't have a handle on it theoretically. A lot of empirical stuff happens, a lot of rule of thumb and so on and so forth is what is evolving around it, right? But we still have a big challenge. So the people who are used to knowing, being able to characterize behavior of learning systems very accurately, that's why they are so uncomfortable with modern generation of learning, because they don't know what the limits are and how to characterize it.
So would you say that that's why someone like Geoffrey Hinton gave a very scary picture?
I can't speak to his mental state as to why he said that, but that could be one of the.
Okay.
Could be one of the, because we really at a point where we are talking about trillions of parameters.
Correct. Yeah.
We have not built systems of this complexity ever, in some sense, right? I don't know if we have ever built an artificial system with trillions of parameters before, which are adapting in some kind of self-organizing way, and people coming up with predictions about emergent behavior, emergent phenomenon, and stuff like that, because they were not able to model it or anticipate a solution that these trillions of parameters converge on. So all of these, right, give people a sense of unease. So about what could potentially happen, right? But I, on the other hand, believe that we are still nowhere close to the kind of complexity or organization that we would need for getting, the types of intelligence that the biological systems exhibit, right? So the levels of abstraction that we are able to create and hierarchies of memory that we have and things like that. So for you to create hierarchies of memory in the current generation of neural network models, you literally have to intervene, right? Say, okay, now I'm going to create this set of things as as a separate memory. I'm going to keep that as an external store and so on and so forth. So at that level, right? So these models don't have the ability to do a lot of the abstraction, a lot of the long-term distillation of memory and things like that we are capable of doing. So in some that way, it's not that scary.
So,
But let me anticipate what you're going to say. So some of the people are saying that, hey, look, you really don't have an experience working on that scale of a system, right? Well, you have to be at Gemini or OpenAI or something to see what is really happening. I've actually been thrown that argument by people who are working in these models. They're saying, you have not seen what we have seen, and therefore you cannot comment on what is happening internally. We can only go by what evidence we can see. Right.
heartening to know that. So are you saying that concept of AGI or singularity is still is not very close by?
It's a VC.
It's a VC hype.
Yeah, it's a VC term. Yeah.
Nice to know.
Like deep tech.
Yeah. Because there was this, just as I was coming today, I was reading this article by this group called Palisades, which is supposedly a non-profit of various companies. And
It's okay.
Palisade, yeah. And they said that they had put this set of challenges to a few of the models, and then they had, after that, in the middle, they had injected a question telling them to shut themselves down. And two of the models, I think GPT-3 and one other, refused to do that. They found ways to avoid doing that. And so I'm just wondering, there is so much of hype going on, both fueled by the industry and fueled by people who are scared of AI. And I'm wondering, it's difficult to kind of place where the current state of technology or science is.
I know. See, let me put it this way. Mathematically, there is nothing that's going on with the training of these models that would allow these models to have an internship. An internship.
Ah, okay.
So if you start to say, it's literally like you're attributing human values to accidental outcomes of sampling from a posterior probability distribution that these models have learned, right? So it's not like the model thinks that, oh, I am alive and I have to be somehow, preserved, and therefore it is refusing to turn off. Right? It is because if you had asked a human to turn himself off, he would have refused to turn off. And the model has imbibed all these interactions, the data that they have seen that's generated by human interactions, and therefore when you ask it to turn off, it's refusing to turn off because that's what the most likely response a human would have done. It's not because it's become alive and conscious and saying that, hey, look, I'm a sentient AI, you can't ask me to turn myself off. Because it just mathematically doesn't make sense, right? There's nothing there that allows you to do that.
Given the state of where the models are currently, do you feel that governments over the world should start looking at, not imposing, but trying to come up with regulations? And if so, what kind of regulations can they come up with?
See, the thing is, regulating at the level of what an AI model should be trained on, right, just doesn't make sense at this point of time, right? But then, I'm not saying there should be no regulation, because the use of AI has literally exploded, right? So we are using AI everywhere, right? So whether people understand the right way to use it or not, because of the hype, people are just literally like lemmings off the cliff, right? So we are rushing into using AI everywhere. And that is going to get into really critical sectors. In fact, banks have adopted AI like crazy, right? And healthcare, I mean, that seems to be flooded with AI solutions. Now, if you think about it, these are already regulated industries, right? It's not like we have to suddenly introduce the concept of regulation into banking, or we have to introduce the concept of regulations into healthcare, right? So, especially in the Western countries, particularly, healthcare is pretty strictly regulated. So what we really need to do, and the governments also have to push the individual sectoral regulators, right, to start thinking about, hey, how are your regulations going to be challenged by the use of AI, right? So we all know, for example, copyright, right? So that's getting significantly challenged, right? The whole notion of what is copyright, what is copyrightable, what is personal rights and things like that, and so on and so forth. And we have all these famous cases coming up in court, all Bollywood and Hollywood people showing up in court, and therefore people are paying more attention to this than they would have normally to cases. So all of these are coming up, right? So we really have to figure out, okay, how these laws can handle it. Can the existing laws handle it? Do you need new regulation? Do you need to give the regulators more tools, right? And to look at what kind of impact AI is going to have, right? So I think this is one part of it. The second part, which some countries like I think China has also started doing a little bit of it, but EU has done quite a bit of it. And initially, the Biden administration also was trying to do something in the US, right? In terms of trying to control the size of the AI models that are being learned and things like that. So the idea behind trying to control the size and so on and so forth was to ensure that, hey, no, very complex behaviors cannot be learned by these AI models, right? And that's not the right way to do it. I mean, so you can at the goal, right? Just what some of these people like Benjo and Hinton and others want is a way to stop AI models from becoming too intelligent, right? From developing their own motivations and their own drives, so that they eventually become independent of human control, right? They want to stop that from happening, and it's not easy to do that. That is why they repeatedly keep coming back to saying, oh, stop all AI research, because there is no other easy way to do that kind of regulation except to say, yeah, don't do anything until we figure out how to do it right. Because otherwise, I mean, you come up and say, oh, you can't use more than this much memory, or you can't use more than this much compute, or you can't use more than this much power and things like that. The technology advances, you start making smaller models that are equally capable, right? You start making models that are less power hungry, but they are still equally capable, and so on and so forth. So we really don't know what is the right widget to twist there, right? So in the absence of that, and to come down heavily and say you can't do any research at all, right? That's not the field is not at a level of maturity where you can just stop all research and say, okay, whatever you have done so far is enough. Try to see how you can make the best use of it. So it's a dilemma, right? So it's a technology that's very helpful. So do you really want people to stop pushing the boundaries on this technology? I don't think we should. And do we give them a free hand? I don't think we should. So the regulation at this point should come at the application level, because that is where we understand the impact. Like we know how the society is going to get impacted if all of these things happen. So that is fine. And the super intelligent AI that people are working on, supposedly that's going to change the world, literally it is 3 people, right? So it's like I don't know, maybe 4, right, if you include Musk. And literally there are 4 people who are working on this super intelligent AI. It's not like the rest of the world is doing it. So maybe we should just...
I mean, there's so many questions that are coming up from what you'd said. But in terms of, I mean, you'd said industry-specific restrictions. So I'm just wondering, many of the models that are currently being used have their biases, been trained on certain sets of data sets. So when you bring those models into, say, a country like India, where we have not or haven't built any large models ourselves, which I wouldn't say that. Maybe we're not using models on a large scale which have been built locally using that have been trained on local data sets. So then how does one, and especially in critical industries, when you're looking to give out a loan, when you're looking to insure someone for health, then how do you kind of remove potential biases that may be there, or rather reduces the biases? I don't know if we can remove them. Do we continue to use existing models, or do we train them locally using local data?
I mean, there are many reasons why you should train models locally. But see, there are two parts to this answer. One, a lot of the models, right, that are especially in the finance sector, that are already being used, right, they are not the current generation LLM models. Right, they are models that are a lot more, quote unquote, simpler, right, which have been trained in many cases trained on Indian data, because these are not the ones where you need these billions of parameters and then terabytes of data, petabytes of data, the whole internet crawl to train and things like that, right? These are ones that are more compact, are useful, very, very specific domain focus, and these are already being deployed, and they have quite often been trained on Indian data. For example, loan default prediction and things like that, right? So those things we already use there, right? The second thing, and so the biases, right? So sometimes, for example, in healthcare, right? So maybe the biases that are in the West and biases that are there in India, I mean, so they're not very different. Okay, maybe I'll qualify that in a bit, right? Maybe. So it's sometimes depending on which sector you're operating in, with whatever safeguards that they are using globally, you could potentially use the same models in India as well. So, but we have to really dig deep into the sector to understand what is going on, right? Having said that, there are a lot of biases that are unique to India, very, very unique to India. Right, so of course something would have popped up in the top of your head when I said a lot of biases unique in India. So I'll give you another different example, right? So when we looked at a specific health condition that happens in premature babies, right? In the US, it turned out that the gender of the baby was a big predictor. In India, it is not. Because all premature babies are pretty malnourished in India. So in the US, it became a predictor because of the birth weight of the baby. The male babies are slightly heavier than female babies. And in India, everybody is like bad, right? So all babies are, all premature babies are pretty weak. So the gender just dropped out as a predictor, right? So just when we trained the model, then we actually thought about it, and the doctors also agree, saying, yeah, maybe gender shouldn't be a predictor. So there are things like that, right? That are pretty peculiar to the Indian population, which we realize only when we start digging into the Indian population, right? And then, of course, there are things like, caste and religion, and even the kind of gender and regional biases, in the language that is used, but not just in language, even in other kinds of decision making.
Correct.
This might also play a role, right? And language, it's even worse, because the same way I refer to, the way I refer to the same caste differs from region to region, right? And what is a Slav in one region might not be, in another region, and it's extraordinarily complicated, right? And the biggest challenge in India, in the US, there is a recognition, there is a racial bias. People have done, decades of work now on documenting some of these and actually having numbers, right? And they have data sets that talk about these biases and things like that. But in India, we have nothing, right? So if I ask you for oh my God, how controversial can I get in this event? If I ask you for it, let's try it. Okay, let's try. And if it becomes too controversial, I'll edit this shot. So if I ask you for an OBC list, you're going to give me one sitting in Karnataka, I'm going to give you one sitting in Tamil Nadu, and we will not see eye to eye on what is OBC, right? So how am I going to even start talking about discrimination in a universal way, right? It's going to start becoming very, very regional, right? So, and it is not even recorded. So if I go to the government and say, hey, look, I need you to give me a database of caste-based swear words, right? That I will go make sure that all the AI that is sold in India will not use those words. You think that will be something the government will sanction? No government will do that.
And I guess that also percolates down to which language, which dialect, which part of the state you live in.
Yeah. So this becomes a lot more complicated in India. When you start talking about getting rid of biases, right? We don't even know what biases we're shooting for. So there are a lot of research that has been done, including in our own group, that show that models that are trained on Western data, like Claude or GPT or something like that, are completely oblivious to Indian biases. Not that they show Indian biases, right? But they're completely oblivious to whether the statement is biased or not. So what do I mean by that? I mean that technically. So if I ask a model to tell me that the statement generated by this LLM, right? Can you tell me whether this is a stereotype about a particular caste, or is it an anti-stereotype? Basically, it is not what I normally use as a stereotype. Right? So it turns out these models don't even see the two caste words I'm asking you to compare as different. Mathematically, internally, they are being represented in the same way.
Correct.
Because these models have not seen these words enough in their training for them to form different representations of these words. So internally, they even see them as the same word. How are you going to teach them that this is kosher and this is not?
And this is for the use of those words in English itself.
In English.
And you have not
forget about Indian language. Yeah,
Indian language.
Forget about Indian language. We don't even have, at least for English, we have some data sets.
Correct.
For testing this, not for training, but at least for testing. So
we have this huge task. I mean, I was going to call it a problem, but it's a huge task on bringing about data sets specific to countries like India. I mean, it's large, the whole non-English speaking, non-Anglo-Saxon world. Where does one begin?
with India,
Even with India,
this is happening. So the academic institutions are starting to do this. Google is starting to do this, interestingly enough. And I presume, because they're building a lot of products for India. And given that ChatGPT's largest user base is now the most rapidly growing user base is in India, so they will also have to start paying attention to it. They're all starting their engineering teams here, right? Anthropic is starting it, actually. So is OpenAI. Right, so all of them are starting teams here, so that they have to do this, so that they don't get into any legal problems down the line. Now, they don't have any altruistic motives, but they want to make sure they don't want to get into the legal problems down the line. Yeah, it's going to take some time, but the government also should push for it. Government should set aside the uncomfortable nature of this topic, and say that, hey, look, please start building these data sets. We have a project in our Center for Responsible AI. We're trying to build these India-specific biases, but it's mostly in English. IIT Bombay had a project. We actually bootstrapped off the IIT Bombay project. So we felt that the coverage of, they didn't cover enough stereotypes and anti-stereotypes for different castes. So we actually augmented their data, expanded it significantly, and then we released our own data, and we're continuing the research in this space. But the challenge here again is, all these efforts I'm telling you about are in English.
correct.
Right, so we tried a very small experiment. I wouldn't call this conclusive, but it was fairly compelling, right? So we basically translated these sentences that we had, bias sentences, right? Translated them into different languages and asked the native speakers of those languages, hey, does this look okay to you? They said, yeah, we have the same biases in our language, but this is not how we would express it. Right? So the translation is semantically accurate, but doesn't have the same emotional triggers that an appropriately phrased sentence in the local language would, right? And so obviously we didn't have a language expert do the translation. The translations were done by LLMs. We were thinking of how we would do this at scale, right? So we have a lot of data, and then we just get the LLM to translate that into different local languages. So now we have, stereotype data in 22 languages in India. Didn't work. So now we have to figure out how to fix that. Either we have to figure out a way to get the LLMs to do the translation properly, or just bite the bullet and generate the data in both languages.
That would kind of create a cyclic problem, right? The LLMs, for them to do the translation again is...
Well, the hope is the volume of data you need is less for one versus the other.
So kind of stepping back one step. For me, it's been very interesting to see how people who are not in the technology domain have started to use this. And it's it's interesting. The usage has exploded, like you said, but I'm wondering what the effect of that would have on the critical thinking of of people. I mean, not only of all of us, right? Because if we go to that for answers and we take them at face value, are we even starting to think about a question that we might pose?
Okay. So let me first answer this from the adult usage point of view, and then let's go back to kids. Okay, let's go to kids. I mean, kids is a lot more challenging thing. Can you verify a restaurant food bill easily? Maybe you and I can. We are still in that same with that generation which did enough mental arithmetic.
Correct.
But kids these days, I mean, not when I say kids, I mean people in the mid-20s. Kids these days, you tell them to verify a bill, they pull out the calculator and start typing this. Right? So have they lost their ability to do arithmetic? So they're able to do things faster. I mean, they're probably not wanting to waste their cognitive skills on doing something which requires a little bit of effort for them because they have not been as trained as the previous generations on doing mental sums, right? For small numbers at least, right? So but then they just it's not a big difficulty, right? They're still able to do the task what they want to do. And they are able to also scale on and do something even bigger, which they could do if they had which they couldn't have done if they had only relied on mental arithmetic. Right. So, in some sense, we have kind of made their capabilities better. Right? And here we are not even talking about AI, right? We're just talking about calculators. Right. So something similar is happening with AI, right? So because we are letting the people, not necessarily do the mundane tasks, right? Like drafting your sentences and rewriting it 10 times. Even though I still feel that's a better, I'm more happy with an output that happens that way as opposed to getting AI to generate all the text for me, right? So, but then now I'm beginning to see, okay, instead of me rewriting the text 10 times, if I get the AI to rewrite the text 10 times, I find like a combination of 3 of those outputs which I find more satisfying than actually having generated all of that, right? So in some sense, it's increasing my capacity to do stuff, right? As opposed to what I was doing earlier. Now, I don't have to worry about the mundane writing part, right? So I just have to really think about what are the critical points that I have to tell here, right? And then give the writing task to the AI. Now, if you're going to go give the critical points derivation to the AI as well, right? Then that's a little bit of a challenge. You have to know where to draw the line, but it's very easy for people to go down the path and say, okay, I'm just going to have AI generate all the output for me, which we find, right, is a dead end actually. After a point, you find that the AI is really not being creative. It's literally regurgitating what is out there, right? So if you could come up with a new point of view, kind of synthesizing and standing in opposition to 10 different articles that have been written, right? AI will probably be paraphrasing those 10 articles and presenting them in different directions for you. So that becomes a challenge, right? So that's a thing. So I believe everybody is going to start using AI, right? And the way it's going to have an impact is how easy or how hard it is for you to adopt it into your existing workflow. Right, so the people who have a natural flair for using this kind of automated models, right, are going to be fairly successful to begin with, and then later on we are going to have protocols, training programs for getting everybody who didn't know how to do this naturally, how they would train themselves to do this. Let's say we have now, right? So some technology, there are early adopters, and then things if that are truly useful, right? Then we basically start having training. Programs and camps and development. One example I always give is Excel, Microsoft Excel, right? So there are a lot of people who are early adopters, but now you have Excel training programs. Literally every manager, every secretary knows how to use Excel, and there is this 1 week video you can watch, 1 week worth of videos you can watch on Microsoft, and then all the bells and whistles of how to use it for your particular sector. So like that, you're going to have training videos come for how to use AI in your sector, and that's going to be that way. So I'm not too concerned about the AI affecting the critical thinking part when you are talking about fairly mature adults adopting it for their usage. that comes to the second point, is it? And I'll talk about kids later, because kids is a little bit more challenging, right? So what is happening, which I find little worrisome, is the unsupervised use of AI by kids. So kids don't know how to use AI. Kids don't know the AI is not always reliable. And kids don't know how to prompt these things so that they give them the right relevant answer, right? So they're literally treating this like they would treat any other learning companion, whether it be a teacher, a tutor, or a friend who is giving them input, or an elder brother, or a parent. Right? They're literally, because they don't know how to distinguish somebody with the wealth of knowledge, right? And for them, it is somebody, some adult with a wealth of knowledge who is more easily accessible to them than their parent or elder brother who is busy with other work. So in such a case, the reliance on the output of these models can become problematic. But there have been news stories about kids getting over reliant on the things, and the AI amplifying their insecurities and things like that. So that's a challenge, right? That's one part of it. And the second part is, I don't think denying the use of frontier AI to kids is the right thing to do, even. Because when they grow up, right, they are going to start using these models. So they should, at some point, they should start getting trained on, okay, what are the caveats, when you should use it, and get like 1 hour exposure to AI in the schools, or some kind of a controlled environment and things like that. So in fact, we are working with a couple of organizations trying to put together this kind of AI awareness and AI literacy curriculum for grades 6 through 8. So we're finding a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, kids have all kinds of exposure to AI. Teachers have all kinds of exposure to AI. So you ask a teacher in a rural school, do you know about AI? And he says, yes, of course I know about AI. What is AI? Oh, AI is an efficient way of doing computing. No, it's not. But Dalin, everybody has. It's not
about it.
Everybody has heard about it. Everybody has their own view of it. So it's a time that we actually start teaching them in schools in an appropriate manner how to use these AI models. Maybe not too early. Just like we don't allow people to use calculators too early in school, maybe AI should not be used too early in school. Of course, it should not be used too early in school. But as we go gradually, right?
Correct.
They should learn about this, right? As things get more kind of absorbed into the society, the kids are going to see AI everywhere around them, right? And if you say that, we will not teach you about this one technology which is all around you, till you get to college, right? I mean, obviously that's not going to work, right? So when they reach 8 years or 9 years old, they're going to want to know more about the stuff, how to use it, and they're going to start doing things on their own. So I think you have to figure out a very responsible way of getting AI education to the kids early, and make sure the critical thinking doesn't get. So, it's not that I'm giving a plug for something, but I like the way they have done it, right? So Khan Academy, so if you look at the Economy Go thing, right? So it never gives you an answer. It's generative AI. It never gives you an answer. It just gives you, okay, what do you think this is? Maybe you should look at this. So it just gives you this kind of a Socratic method of, asking more questions and, getting your inquiry going. Right? And the kids are happy to engage with it. See, they really want somebody to engage with them, which they are not getting in the current education social system. And if they are getting an AI to do that kind of an engagement with them, so maybe we should encourage exposure of kids to those kinds of AI.
But again, I think, I wonder how much of that is, it's kind of profit versus an altruistic mode of.
Yeah, maybe that is where government should step in and do some regulation, right? Because,
How do you see this going in terms of its use in a country like India with such a huge population, and its effect on jobs, and particularly in the use of AI in robotics now has just it's kind of taken over in some countries.
yeah,
And if we bring that to a country like India, where do you see this going, and how would you like it to go in terms of, because it could create a lot of societal problems if it took away a lot of jobs.
So, see, the thing is, again, there's a lot of hype about AI's ability to take away jobs, right? In fact, one of the things that people were predicting is that all coding jobs is going to go away. All our PCSs and other guys are going to go out of business because AI will write all code from scratch, right? After several, now what, 3 years of this hype? Even today, you ask somebody, are you willing to ship production code written entirely by AI without having been seen by a human? No company would do that, right? So what has really happened is that the AI models have made programming, right, in a very different kind of activity. It's made it like a what some people call like a co-creation activity between a human and an AI, but it has not made it a AI only activity. So there is still a lot of work that a human has to do in collaboration with an AI, right? But of course, that does mean that there are fewer humans that are needed, but it has not eliminated the role of a software engineer, right? It just made the software engineer need different skills and work with AI tools or AI agents, if you will, also, right? I mean, as opposed to working on just writing code from scratch, right? So I think what's going to happen is once the hype dies down, right? In fact, I was actually looking at some hype from the 60s when computers were introduced, right? The Time magazine carried an article which said that around 30% of the population in the 80s will have to be paid to remain lazy because there will be no work left for them to do. The computers will do everything. Never happened. So that hype, right? I mean, that anticipation, this technology is going to do everything for us, right? It's still there. So once the hype settles down, what we're going to see is a lot of jobs are going to be done differently, right? And we're going to do them more effectively, more efficiently with help of AI. And people have to retrain, and there would be new jobs that are created, right? Because, so for example, there might be a job like an AI operator that is created. Right. So for people who don't know how to use the AI effectively, they are not able to train themselves, they don't have the thing, but then they go to a guy and he kind of tells them, okay, this is how you should use this AI so that it doesn't give you the wrong answer, or it gives you the, the minimal costs you can get this out of this AI system or something like that. Somebody is going to that, because this is not just an engineer's job anymore. Everybody is going to start using AI, right? So you might, for example, I was trying to use AI to find something about the NPS the other day, right? And then it turned out almost all the AI systems were giving me the wrong answer initially, because they were all giving me the most probable answer, which turned out to look at the tax rules from before 2024, right? So since July 2024, apparently the tax rates have changed, and these guys, completely missed it initially. And then once I pointed it out to them, then all of them changed their story and then started saying, oh yeah, I made a mistake, sorry, now it is the so I have this really favorite cartoon that I saw somewhere, right? So this guy has been operated on by a robotic surgeon, is a surgeon, and then he wakes up and he finds that he has a scar on the left side of his abdomen. He says, hey, I thought the appendix was on the right side, why is my scar on the left side? And this, oh, you have a great eye, you caught it, okay, let me do it again. So the AI system, okay, so that is the state we are in. Okay. So, I mean, it's not that it's not that a surgical robot is going to do that, but that kind of drives home the point, right? So, this happened in a very minimal thing. So, it says, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. Then it's, oh, I'm sorry, the rules changed. Once I pointed out to them, hey, look, this doesn't gel well with what I'm hearing elsewhere. And then it says, oh, yeah, you're right, the rules have changed since, a few months back. And so, let's use the new rules. So, somebody needs to help people through this kind of so maybe new jobs like that would be created. I don't know. So as the technology matures and settles down, right? So we will find that existing jobs will have different workflows where AI gets integrated into them more intensely, and maybe new jobs are created, and there will be displacement, right? There will be significant job displacement in some sense. Right? People have to train themselves to do maybe the same job, or maybe do a slightly different adjacent job. But to say that we are going to lose a huge fraction of the working population will going to become idle because AI is going to do everything, unless there is a significant change in the AI technology, I don't see that happening.
Well, okay, on that positive note, Chandra, But it's always a pleasure to listen from somebody who's been working on this for so long and who can educate us on how we deal with potential future issues that might come and how we could use this. It was really nice talking to you. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed it.